I only ate one of her babies.
Welcome. You've got mail.
Welcome, everyone. Welcome. Come on in, find your seats. It's so great to have you with me here tonight. Thank you all so much for joining me. My name is Mr. Aegis, and I will be your teacher for the evening. Thank you so much for coming here to my streamiversary and this new model reveal. Yes, hello. Hello, everyone. How are you? This is me. This is my new human form. I have finally discovered how to retransform into a human being. Just a normal man. Just normal men. Yes, indeed, Quizmaster Kevin. I've buttoned the lowest button. It's more of a formal thing, but that's okay. Oh, actually, why don't I, now that we're here, why don't I just take my jacket off? Yeah, there we go. I'm there. That's a little bit more comfortable. Yeah. Yes, Fireball, we will be having a little lesson. We're going to be learning about how memory works, and we're going to be talking about how to learn better in school and in your life generally. Skills that you can translate to anything, to your hobbies, to new things you want to learn. Pokechan, yes, indeed, a new model. I can still wiggle my ears. And I do have to, can't see it right now, but I do still have my tail. It did not get lost in the transformation. I like it. I just can't help the fact that it wags faster when I'm smiling. I guess that's just how it works. That's just how animals work. Yes, and I would love to have a magical girl transformation type of thing. I think I'm going to commission that. I'm going to save up and commission an animation that transforms me between my two forms. I am quite formal here. Actually, you know what? You're right. It's probably a little too formal. Let me roll up my sleeves. There we go. Now it looks like I'm ready to get some work done. Let me take this vest off there. Yeah, there we go. I'm much more comfortable now. It is sort of a bartender look, yeah. Maybe I could try being a little bit more casual. Ah, there we go. Wrap a little sweater around my shoulders. But I think you know what's missing. There they are. Ah, they've climbed up on top of me. There we go. Climbed up on my shoulders as they love to do. Moki and Ori, the sweet babies, the beef noodles, the devious little creatures that live in my walls, basically. They bit me. They love to do that. The noodles, yeah, they're with me now. They can go with me everywhere I go. I do indeed have great physics. Ah, head pats. The head pats. Pat the Badger has arrived and is still working. We love to see it. I love to feel it on my head. There they are. And there I am. Hello. Live and in color. Oh, there they are in the tube. The sweet babies. Well, not so sweet. They are kind of evil, actually, but that's okay too. Sort of a badgerception going on here. It is a very nice avatar cheesecake. Thank you so much for that. I'm very happy with it. They are very derpy, long cats. Very intelligent. Just as intelligent, I would say, as any cat. But they are also much more clumsy. They can be quite foolish and get themselves into things they should not. Oh, are they stealing a sock? Yeah, they've got a sock in there. Yes, this evening we're going to be talking about memory as we get back into the school period. But this isn't just about school. Memory and how you learn affects everything. Any hobbies you would like to learn, skills you would like to practice. We're going to talk about how we can improve our memory and ways to improve our learning. So let's start this school year off right. But also, work, hobbies, it applies to all of them. Memory is everything. But over a third of students who consider dropping out of school do so because of trouble studying. That is the main reason they give for why they consider quitting. It's because they have trouble studying. That is according to a survey by McGraw-Hill. I guess people just don't enjoy studying as much as the lo-fi hip-hop study girl. But why? What about you? Let's start off with that. What about studying don't you like? What about studying or trying to learn something new do you struggle with? Or what are some of the things that you do that you just think, these aren't working? Or why isn't this working for me? Or as you say that your focus is the issue, your lack of attention. I think some of the very common ones are going to be shown here. Issues with time management, distraction, lots of distractions, a lot of stimulation available, procrastination, waiting until the last minute, lack of sleep is often cited by people, not having any motivation, not feeling like there's a good reason, and just being frustrated at slow progress, for example. So that's the why. Those are some of the reasons why and how people feel like studying just isn't working. Not effective for them. Yeah, Cheesecake just mentions frustration. Frustrating to do everything the teacher said, but still messing it up. Some small oversight, missing the little details. The first thing that we'll talk about, well, what is memory? What does memory mean? Don't be frightened by the picture of the brain. We're not going to go deep into the neurology. You're not going to need to learn brain areas. That isn't this kind of stream. Don't go deep into the scientific medical details. We keep this a skills-based class to help us learn how to do things better. But it is useful for us to focus on these three parts. The things that give our brain its hard drive. The first is the prefrontal cortex. This is the front part of your brain, the front part of your noggin. This is what has your working memory. This is that initial temporary storage, the way your brain manipulates new information that's needed to do tasks. And it includes your executive functions, how you plan and make your decisions. Then there is the hippocampus, this brown little tube here. It's not really brown in your head. It doesn't actually have this color. Your brain is not rainbow colored. But you get what I mean. It's called the hippocampus because that's a word that means seahorse. I don't really get the resemblance, but I don't really understand why scientists name things the way they name them. But anyways, there's then the amygdala within the hippocampus. Right there at the end of the hippocampus. This is involved in your emotion-based memories. This is what consolidates memories that have emotional significance to you. And the last thing is the neocortex, which is not shown here because it's actually covering the outside of your wrinkly little blob inside your skull. That's responsible for long-term storage and memories. That's sort of like the hard drive. Like the hippocampus, where memories begin to be formed and processed. Like the amygdala, your emotion center. So days later, you try to remember the name of that person you met at the party. If it's successful, your brain retrieves that information, it accesses the stored information, and you remember that person's name is Herta. You think, God, I really didn't like her. Herta, right. She really hurted my feelings. Then there is reconsolidation. So the process where those memories begin to get flexible and they can get restabilized, potentially being modified. So this is how memories sometimes can change for people. The way you felt about that meeting might change. Memories are not always reliable. So if you later learn more about this person, you learn about her interests, her job, this new information will be integrated and reconsolidated with that original memory. It's much more detailed and rich. So maybe you find out that she's an even worse person than you thought. So those original memories become even worse of her. And lastly, there is amplification. Amplification through rehearsal. Consciously or unconsciously repeating information to enhance its retention. So if you intentionally repeat Herta's name to yourself after the party so that you can recall all of the details of the conversation, you want to remember all the terrible things she said so that you can throw them in her face later. That would help strengthen the memory. The next topic we want to cover is the types of memory. So there are parts of the brain involved in memory. There are stages to memory. And there are different types of memory. There are two main types of memory. The first that we'll talk about is declarative memory. These are the basic facts and events, things you remember. So there's semantic and episodic. That first one, semantic, that's things like general knowledge. So the capital of a country. So somebody tell me what the capital of Turkey is. Without looking it up, I know you're at your computers or phones, you could look it up, but don't. What's the capital of Turkey? Gravy, Aiko says. It's also not gravy. Sandwich, Rao says. It's also not sandwich. Istanbul, Dragon says. Well, it's not Constantinople, that's for sure. It's Ankara. Ankara is the capital of Turkey. But yeah, that would be declarative memory. Semantic memory, facts and figures and such. Stuffing, Henry Bear says. All very good answers. Not quite correct, though. Episodic memory are details about personal events, their context, things that happened to you rather than just facts and figures. This declarative memory is in contrast to the other main type of memory, which is implicit or unconscious memory. Two big parts of this are priming and procedural. So priming are past experiences, associations, links between different types of links between different memories that you have. So if you see a book and you associate that with library, you were primed by connections between those two things. And two, you said that one symptom of fibromyalgia you read about was memory issues. That does make sense. Honestly, anything that would affect brain areas could impact memory. But there are two things we're going to talk about in terms of why we forget things. Why we lose memory, why we don't remember things that were at one time stored in our brains. We don't actually know a whole lot about this. I don't mean me, I mean like we. the royal we, humans, science. We don't have a good understanding of why these kind of memory issues happen. But this research by Ebbinghaus comes from a long time ago. 1885, this guy was around. And he wrote about the curve of forgetting. That when you first learn something, it begins to decay pretty quickly as it falls off. And each time you relearn that fact, or you study it, you practice it, it sort of resets the curve and shifts it upward, make it stick more and more. But this particular research that goes all the way back to 1913, and it still seems to hold true. But we don't really understand whether it's decay or interference. Those are two big ideas within memory and learning. Do our memories simply fade if they're not used? Are they actively pruned by the brain to, I don't know, make more space? Do cues just get broken? Kind of like how if you look at an old web page and it has links in it, and you click the link and it doesn't work. Things like that happen in the brain. We think that might be why we have the sensation of something being on the tip of our tongue. The cue is missing that would normally associate between that memory you're having and your ability to describe it. So 90% of cracked. Yeah, Rao, exactly. Or like in Reddit, where somebody actually had the problem you were trying to solve, and they're like, oh, I found the answer here at this link, and then you click the link and it's dead. Thanks for nothing. But sometimes there are conflicting memories that are close to the one you're trying to recall. And so there's interference between those two memories. But you should know that forgetting is natural. Forgetting happens. We may not understand why exactly, but it happens. It's okay. You don't need to get frustrated if you forget something. Understanding this and accepting that can help you stem some frustration from forgetting things, from having trouble studying. It's okay to forget, and everyone does. So how can we stem that curve that Ebbinghaus was talking about? The inability to retrieve our previously stored information. So, for example, if we don't reinforce the memory of meeting Herta, then we might start forgetting certain details. The exact sound of her voice, what she was wearing, what you talked about. And as you miss more and more details, the links become less and less strong, weaker and weaker. However it happens, how can we stem that curve? Whether it's for studying and school, or for learning new skills. What we're going to go over in the rest of the lesson are things like better study and practice habits, mental mobility. We are going to talk about the physical factors involved in memory, like sleep. Maintaining our positive perspective. Trying to increase our motivation, our inspiration. And trying to maintain better active attention. What about you? Again, what about you? What do you think in each of these categories would be the most useful for you? What do you think you could improve the most on? If you could, right now, automatically increase one of these factors, what would it be? Definitely active attention, Wes. I think that one's going to be pretty popular, yeah. Active attention, Aiko, yep. Makes perfect sense. Get distracted easily? I feel it. Physical factors. think that's the other one I was expecting to hear. Yeah, Rao. The physical aspects of memory and learning. Your physical health plays a huge role in that. Well, when we first start talking about study habits and practices, we got to go over the usual suspects. And what are the usual suspects when it comes to studying and learning? These factors, these practices, these habits that people typically use when trying to learn new things. Passively rereading, or just passively listening to a lecture. Highlighting things in their textbook or notebook. Multitasking, trying to do multiple tasks within their study at once. And cramming, doing a whole lot of study in a short period of time. These are definitely the usual suspects that people get into when they're trying to learn something, when they're in school. So again, be honest with me, class. Which of these do you think you have been guilty of in the past? When you've been studying, when you were in school, which of these was you? Rereading Fireball? Multitasking all day, every day, Rao says. Not enough time in the day. Zetsu Alpha cramming the literal hour before the exam. Cramming, yeah. I figured that was going to be a big one too. Just like I was racing at the beginning of this stream to get everything set up. Cramming and rereading, yeah, it just doesn't stick. Henry, I completely agree. What we're going to talk about next, turning the tables on all of these. Turning each of these things on their head to make them actually work for us. Well, the first thing we're going to do, to turn the table, to use the old reverse card, we're going to turn that passive reading and rereading into a more active engagement. How we're going to do that, this technique, this first technique, is we are going to turn ourselves into the teacher. We are going to be the teacher. As you read something, don't be a passive observer of that information. This is why people read something, they read a passage and then they reread it, and then reread it again, and they're like, why isn't this sticking? Why do I keep having to go back and read the same passage over and over again? Instead of just reading it, we're going to stop after each segment and we're going to summarize it. We're going to summarize that section, and then we're going to teach it. After you read one section of whatever it is that you're trying to study, you're going to stop. You don't keep reading, you stop. And you take that section that you just read and you summarize it in your own words. How many of you have done coding, have done programming before? And have you heard of the concept of rubber duck debugging? Rubber ducking or whatever. This is a practice where someone who is trying to find a bug in the code, they are rereading the code, they're looking it through it, and you hold a rubber duck. I mean, you don't have to actually hold it, but basically you explain each line or segment to the rubber duck as if you were teaching it. Because you having to explain it as if you're talking to someone who doesn't understand it makes you understand it better. It helps you find the problem. You're no longer a passive recipient of information. You are actively working with the information. Fireball's rubber duck is a plush turtle, for example. Thinking about the brain areas we've talked about, and thinking about how memory works, those stages, it makes sense why this would work so much better. You're actually working with the information. You're manipulating it in your mind. You're rearranging it to explain it to someone else. So Some studies have shown that this actively engages you in reflective knowledge construction, as they called it. You are actually constructing, you're building with the things you've learned. Anyway, yeah, so that's our first tactic. We're going to go from being passive to role-playing. Yeah, so that's our first technique. We're going to role-play. The second technique that we're going to use to turn the tables of those common mistakes in studying. Well, the reason that highlighting tends to not work so well is that people highlight everything. Or they highlight huge sections thinking, well, I need to remember all this, I'll just highlight the whole paragraph. Or they'll circle the whole paragraph. Well, if you highlight a whole passage, you're not really helping yourself. So that second technique is to just highlight one word or sentence. Just one specific thing. And the first reason why this helps is that it forces you to think about, well, what word is most important? What sentence is most important? Then you have to actively, in your mind, think about each of those sentences, each of those words. Which of these is most important? Well, this one's kind of important. This one's kind of important too, but this one's the most important. Now you have rethought about each of those sentences, and you've ordered them in a hierarchy of importance. It makes you intentional. You have to intentionally choose that word, that sentence, that one formula. And a critical part of it is then to make a note about that one sentence or passage that you highlighted, because that will help the connection. It will help the link, those associations, the triggers. Highlighting things in different colors, that can be very useful if you are doing it the same way for both things. If you're being very intentional. Being judicious with things you select. And we'll go over something later. That's a very good point, actually. I'm going to integrate that into a section we'll cover later. And then too, you like to explain new things that you learn to others and to yourself. Yeah, that's that. You're rehearsing it, you're teaching it. It sticks stronger for you. We're learning together. Me giving this lesson right now, all of the stuff we're talking about is going to be enhanced in my mind because I'm doing it again. Helps you to make the associations. That'll help keep things from becoming stuck on the tip of your tongue. So the second thing we're going to do is associate. We're going to make associations. So our first technique was to roleplay. Our second technique is to ass. Yes, yes. We're going to turn the tables on the next mistake by turning our multitasking into single tasking. Now, we've talked about the concept of single tasking before in our lesson on overstimulation. So some of this might not be new to you, but if you are new to the class, I like to use the word single tasking to describe setting aside every other task and just focusing on the one thing. Now, your brain might feel like you need a lot of stimulation, and this happens to a lot of people because of how overstimulated we are in the world today, and our brain craving all of that external stimulation. But you can help make it feel like you're still doing more things by creating a learning zone. Creating, whether it's a physical or virtual space, that is dedicated to what you're practicing, what you're doing. So it feels like a place that you're in. It feels like doing more than just reading a book. I'm in my space for learning. So we need to practice limiting the stimulation. So the first thing we were doing is role-playing. The second thing we were doing is ass. And the third thing we're going to do is to stop stimulating. We're going to stop stimulating ourselves so much. Yes, yes. The fourth thing we're going to do to turn the tables on a common mistake in practicing our studying and learning is we're going to go from cramming to quartering. We are not going to cram everything inside of our head space into our head hole. We're going to stop stimulating ourselves so much. We're just going to do it in smaller chunks more often. What I'm saying, though, is that 3 one-hour sessions of studying or practicing anything is better than 1 5-hour session. It's better than 1 6-hour session. You're better off studying less total amount of time and spacing it out. You can actually learn more in less time if you don't cram. You're just better off that way. 3 is better than 1. I would rather have you have shorter sessions that were not as long, just doing it more often. Do it more often, but don't do it as long. Yeah. Because it's not how long you do it. It's not about how long you do it. It's about the quality of the time that you're doing it. It's about how good you're doing it. You know? I would rather have you do it better than do it long. First was role-playing. Then was ass. Then we stopped stimulating. And then we finished faster. The next technique that we're going to talk about is being a simp. We're going to be a simp. And I don't mean sniper monkey. We're going to be a simp. We're going to be a simp because it's our acronym. We're going to be a simp. The first letter of that term, A, for acronym. Mnemonics. Mnemonic devices help encode memory, helps us recall because we're reconstructing things. Again, it's working with the memory, working with the knowledge, not just passively receiving it. We're doing something with it in our head. There's quite a lot of research about these things, but an acronym, just as the basic definition, an acronym is something that you say. So NASA is an acronym. ASAP is an acronym. A simp is an acronym. I want to differentiate that even though it doesn't really matter. Most people just say acronym for anything. But if you don't say it, if it's you like repeating the letters, like CBS, that's not an acronym, technically. It's an initialism. It's an acronym if you turned it into a word that you say. To my understanding of English. For example, back when we had our lesson on cannabis, and in other lessons we've talked about regarding habits, I've used an acronym. An acronym called PLAP. PLAP. To help us remember that some of the things we can use to disassociate ourselves with bad habits is to consider the people, locations, our access, and different plans we make that tend to trigger the use of that bad habit or engaging in that bad habit. So if you are trying to cut down on your drinking, you think about, well, who are the people I usually end up drinking with? Who is it that whenever I'm hanging out with them, I end up drinking? Or whenever I go to this particular place, I end up drinking. Anyway, the second part of Be a Simp that we're going to talk about, the S, is for shortcuts. Taking shortcuts, finding ways to cut to the Q. So taking the first word or a keyword within a thing that you're trying to remember and finding some way to associate that with the rest of the content. People use this technique often with trying to memorize a speech. When I've given long presentations and you have to stand up there without a lot of notes, you try to remember keywords within your next paragraph or your next statement that would help you to remember the rest of that passage. This helps give you an overview. It helps you to look down from a higher place onto the rest of the content. But yeah, we're talking about mnemonics. Now, all of these things we're talking about are a type of mnemonic, but mnemonics specifically, the way people think of them, these are sentences, statements, something that helps you remember the whole passage. So one mnemonic is wash a delicious juicy mango. Wash a delicious juicy mango. That some people use to remember the first 4 presidents. Wash a delicious, why can't I say that word? Wash a delicious juicy mango. Washington. Adams, A-D, a delicious. Juicy, Jefferson. And mango, M-A, Madison. Exactly, Heavy Mole. Every good boy deserves fudge. So wash your delicious mango to remember the first 4 presidents. But then you can remember the next 4 presidents with another mnemonic. Mirrors add jealous vanity. Mirrors add jealous vanity. To remember Monroe, there's an R and O in mirror, Monroe. You got another A-D, the other Adams. Add Jackson, J-O. Jealous. Vanity, Van Buren. So wash a delicious juicy mango because mirrors add jealous vanity. And you've got the first 8 presidents. Oh, and where is William Henry Harrison? The 9th, right after this. He was also the first president to die in office. Meaning that he was the first good president. Oh, anyway. The I in Be a Simp stands for imagine. I like this one. So, a simp acronym shortcut, imagine. This is storytelling. This is using narrative to remember things. Is that a lot of our memories rely on narrative storytelling. The stories we tell ourselves help us remember or forget. Have you ever met someone who is a liar? I mean, I know you have. But it seemed like they really believed their own bullshit. Like they lied a lot, but it seemed like they actually believed that the lie is true. My perception on that is that the story they tell themselves in their head, the narrative of their life, they do actually think that it's true. So like those old family stories where you have that family member that genuinely believes that they were, not the bad person in some situation in the family. They probably do believe that. Because the narrative they've woven of their involvement in that situation over the course of their lives, they actually have come to believe it. But this can be used positively because you can make narratives in your head that help you remember. That help you remember accurately. You make up a story that involves the various parts. So I've got a little story here. Let's say you're trying to remember the steps of a new task at work. You're working in some mechanical job, and you're trying to remember that for this particular piece of engineering, this particular device that you're working on, you need to tighten two nuts almost all the way, and then you need to put some of that white sealant cord around it, and then you screw it down all the way. So I tell a story to remember this, saying Mrs. Wrench steals two nuts and she goes to the alley, but before she takes the nuts all the way to the end, she ties them up with some white rope. Now, I don't know why this wrench has bedroom eyes. I don't understand why the artist did this with these two nuts next to her. I'm not really certain why this looks this way, but don't question it. She steals these two nuts. She takes them right to the alley. She ties them up with the white rope, and then she takes them all the way. And that's my story, to help me remember. To tighten those two nuts almost all the way first, then put the white sealant on, and then screw them all the way down. A dumb little example, but helps you to kind of remember. Oh yes, imagine, tell stories. And the last, the P in Be a Simp, is pseudo-acronyms. Don't look this up, but do you know what a pseudo-acronym is? What they can help you to do. Where did I find that wrench? It was on Canva. So someone on Canva took the time to draw that sultry wrench next to two nuts. I didn't do that. It wasn't me. I just used the asset that was available to me. Like an acronym, but not quite. I'll give you that one, Rao, because that's technically true. Technically correct, the best type of correct. But a pseudo-acronym is something like SFX. Because special effects isn't initialized by the letters S, F, and X. XP isn't an acronym or initialism of experience points or experience. And did you know, you're going to learn something new here, SOS does not stand for Save Our Ship. It doesn't stand for Save Our Souls. You know what SOS stands for? Do you know what SOS stands for? Rao says sink or swim. Henry Bear and the Dragon might have it correct. It doesn't stand for anything. SOS doesn't stand for anything. It's just that SOS gives the Morse code of 3 long or 3 short Morse code taps. It's just sort of like an alarm. You know, like when the tornado alarm goes off and it goes up and down and up and down. SOS doesn't stand for anything. It's not an acronym at all. But it helps you remember. Everyone remembers SOS. Beep, 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 beep. So you can get creative with your acronyms. It doesn't have to be the exact letters or, the exact mnemonic. K9. The letter K and the number 9 is not actually an acronym or initialism. Barbecue. BBQ. We gaslighted ourselves into believing it meant something. We did. Society collectively gaslit itself into thinking that SOS actually meant something. It doesn't mean anything at all. It's just the Morse code being a convenient short alarm, like a short alarm blast. And because SOS, if someone was just tapping out SOS, it wouldn't mean anything else. Yeah, you can get creative with your pseudo acronyms. And if you do get creative with these shortcuts, that would help you remember it too, because you're also, again, constructing and reconstructing. You're thinking about what it is that you're learning as you try to think of a way to turn it into an acronym or a mnemonic or a story or a shortcut. Your brain is having to work with that information, break it down, reconstruct it, think about it creatively. That's going to help it stick in your head a whole lot better. But now it's time to get into a few harder truths as we get into the second half of this lesson. Some of the tougher things that we need to talk about when it comes to learning and memory. And honestly, that's the physical factors. We can use all kinds of techniques and tricks and tips and shortcuts, but there are some things that are going to be hard no matter what. Are we talking about breaking habits? We were for a little bit, Heavy Mo, yeah. We're talking about breaking bad habits, we're talking about breaking bad, and we're talking about creating good habits. And I was referring to one of our previous lessons. But yeah, one of these harder truths is that the physical factors are going to play an enormous role. Bigger than we want to believe. Bigger than we would like. And the first one we're going to talk about is maybe the biggest. Sleep. Most of us don't do enough of it. Most of us don't get a good enough quality of it. And so it's one of the harder things for us to do. But better sleep would make you better at remembering things. It would make it easier for you to perform, for you to remember, for you to learn a skill. We talked about breaking things down, right? Doing things in shorter amounts over a longer period of time. Because consolidation happens when you sleep. We've had a whole lesson on sleep in the past. And you can go check that out in our WODs list. Our previous lessons there on YouTube. And we will give that lesson again. That's one that I think is so important. We'll do it maybe twice a year rather than just once a year. But sleep has enormous impact on our cognition. I'm not going to get too deep into this because we have given this lesson before and we can go reference it. But quite a few studies have been done on sleep and memory and learning, as you can imagine. It says a substantial body of evidence indicates that both slow wave sleep and REM sleep contribute to the consolidation of complex, emotionally salient declarative memories. It sounds like a bunch of buzzwords and jargon, but what it means is that both stages of sleep, well, there's 4, but there's REM sleep and non-REM sleep, both of them improve your ability to remember things. Especially the complex things, especially things that you've put some emotional attachment to. Which means that if you're able to do things like make a story, maybe a funny story that makes you laugh, that's a positive emotion. Memories that are tied to emotion can be very strong, easier to remember. But this one is also good. Some portion of sleep's apparent memory benefit may be initiated during the first few minutes of eyes closed rest before participants even fall asleep. Even just a brief period of rest can help your brain consolidate memories. Even just taking a break, closing your eyes and resting for a little bit could help your memory. Anyway, yes, even just brief periods of rest can help you. But a good, long night of sleep, that's what's going to really help you remember. The next physical factor, and one that, again, is kind of tough, that can be hard, is nutrition. Nutrition is a huge factor, as you might imagine, but not one that people want to think about. Nutrition is not just food. It's serious science when it comes to whether or not you're going to remember things, whether your brain is going to work right. The first ones we want to talk about are vitamins B6 and B12. These are really important for the synthesis of new neurotransmitters. The foods that are really rich in these are things like seafood, potatoes and bananas, starchy vegetables, They have a lot of these B vitamins that can improve your brain health. So you can think of bananas come in big bunches. Bunches, 6 and 12. Big bunches, big numbers. How are you going to remember all this stuff, Heavy Mole? With these techniques, of course. You can go back to our slide about being a simp. The second nutrient we want to talk about, or set of nutrients, is vitamins A, B1, and magnesium. Low levels of these nutrients can impair the hippocampus-dependent memory. So again, we don't get too deep into the science of it all or the brain areas, but we did mention that the hippocampus is very important in our emotion-related memories. It's very important in processing emotions. And if you are deficient in these nutrients, it can impair those memories and reduce your ability to remember things that have emotional attachment to them. Things that are rich in these three nutrients are nuts. Lots of nuts are particularly rich in magnesium. Again, vegetables like carrots and leafy greens like spinach. Yes, Henry Bear, the hippocampus is the powerhouse of the emotional memory lane. And the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. Lack of magnesium can also cause inflammation in the brain tissue. Something that actually helps your hippocampus-dependent memory, those emotion-related memories, are lactobacillus. So those good bacteria in like cultured dairy foods. Dairy foods that like to go to the opera. A lot of people love to take omega-3s, those fish oils, and they do seem to have a protective effect for brain cell development. And they are important for the construction of the cell membranes, cell walls. Vitamin D as well is an important brain chemical. So make sure you're getting plenty of D. Make sure you're getting enough D. What can people with lactose intolerance use as a substitute? Well, you don't need to have dairy foods to get those good bacteria. There are other foods that have just are enriched with those. Iron is the next one, the next big one to talk about. Because in young people, in children, deficiency in iron can cause big problems in their growth and development. And for adults, low iron can increase fatigue and make cognition more challenging. But these ones I mentioned specifically, in particular because some of these are the ones that have the highest rates of deficiency. Vitamin B12 is more common to be deficient in than, say, vitamin C. Vitamin C, not that many people are getting an inadequate amount. But magnesium, vitamin D, these are more common for people to just not be getting enough of. And plenty of health organizations like the USDA, National Institutes for Health, a lot of studies backing up the role of nutrition in memory and learning. Since we've talked about eating, let's talk about drinking. And I don't mean those Deep Rock Galactic beers. I mean hydration. One of my favorite things to tell people is that if you're thirsty, you've probably already been dehydrated for up to an hour, because it takes some time for the sensation of thirst to really hit you. If you're thirsty, it's already been too long. You should have been drinking water already. And studies back up that dehydration has negative effects on your memory and attention. If you're someone that has trouble paying attention, trouble concentrating, check out whether or not maybe you're just not drinking enough water. Maybe you're dehydrated. Now, I'm not someone who is fully sold on the idea that everybody should drink 8 glasses of water, because I think for a lot of people it should be more. But there's also just no one-size-fits-all solution. Your activity level, the environment, the temperature, your stress levels. All of these can play a role in how much liquid you need. But the general consensus for a lot of people seems to be that 11.5 cups to 15.5 cups, or 2.7 liters to 3.7 liters, is about the right amount. And yes, that equals about 8 to 10 glasses. Cups and glasses are two different things, and glasses aren't really a standard. And coffee substitute water. Well, coffee is a liquid, and it is mostly water. I mean, it's made of almost entirely water. The thing you want to watch with coffee is the caffeine. Now, we did a whole lesson on caffeine as well, and we'll do that one again probably in not too long. But caffeine can dehydrate you. But caffeine actually can have positive effects. And coffee, too, can have a positive outcome on your health. Some studies say that drinking between 3 to 4 cups of coffee a day can actually lower your mortality rate. But we can talk about that when we do our coffee lesson again, or caffeine lesson again. The next physical factor, one of those harder truths when it comes to learning and memory, is physical activity. Another one people don't want to think about too hard. The fact that not getting enough movement can make it harder for you to remember things, can make it harder for you to think. But physical activity, as I always tell people, affects every aspect of your mental and cognitive health. Physical activity, getting an appropriate amount of movement in the day, will affect every part of your health. Your emotional health, your cognition, your physical health. Every part of it is affected by your level of movement. Now, the World Health Organization, their suggestion, their guidelines are that an adult should get about 150 minutes of moderate intensity physical activity or 75 minutes of vigorous intensity activity, or some combination of those that adds up to that amount. Now, what does moderate and vigorous intensity mean? But think of it very simply as moderate physical activity. You can still talk. If you were doing it with someone, you could still talk. It might be a little bit strained, might be breathing a little heavy while you're talking, but you could still chat with someone while you're doing it. Like Germ here, taking a nice ride on their bike. Vigorous intensity physical activity, you're not going to be able to talk much. You're going to be breathing heavy. Like these folks, these very happy pickles playing pickleball. Or this living pickleball, whose life must be an unending series of pain. Their life revolves around being smacked with paddles all day. Beyond the physical factors, though, as we talked about in the beginning of the lesson, don't get frustrated. Forgetting happens. It's okay. It's okay to need more time to learn something. It's okay to need help. And when we talked about increasing our inspiration, I'm going to turn that around and just say, discipline is better than motivation. Why do you think that is, class? Why do you think motivation is so much less important than discipline? What is deficient about motivation that would cause it to be less useful to you than improving your discipline? 100% on D over M. Completely agree, Mo. Jenny says because it just doesn't work. Motivation does come and go, as Wes says. Yeah, motivation is something that happens when you feel like it. You rely on motivation to be the reason you do things. Sometimes you're going to do it, and sometimes you're not. Discipline is doing the thing even when you don't want to do it. So improving your discipline even a little bit is going to be way better than finding new ways to motivate yourself. And as Ralph says, yes, the military doesn't instill motivation in recruits. You do things even when they are hard. I would rather you improve your discipline by 1% than improve your motivation by 5%. Sure, you might do 5% more work when you feel motivated, but you're probably not going to feel motivated all the time. Discipline is the practice of consistently doing the thing. Discipline, by definition, wouldn't be something that just comes and goes. It's you choosing to do that thing, even when you don't feel like it. Or choosing not to do that thing when you shouldn't. The next very important thing to think about is the idea of study groups and learning with others. This is a big one because I know even you just hearing that might set your teeth on edge. Even hearing about needing to do a study group or work in a group, go to a discussion section in your university class, that might already be giving you some jitters or make you feel uncomfortable. That people often don't like working in groups, they don't like studying in groups, they don't like group work. But let me ask you, class, why do you think it's so important? I put these up. I put the topic headers up here right away rather than make you think about it too much since we're later in the lesson. It's because it's just like that role play, but even more interactive. It's just like teaching the teacher or play, teach, play, or learn, teach, learn. But it's even more interactive. It's more in depth. Group learning helps you to reduce your isolation from others. Because studying or learning by yourself can limit your exposure to other people's perspectives. It can make it harder for you to reinforce the concepts. It is actually that important to talk about what you're doing and learning with other people. Because you're not just explaining it to that rubber duck, you're explaining it to a person who can ask you questions, who can probe you for more information, who might be able to teach you something about it. Rao, you say because it turns the information into easy to digest narrative format instead of the basic declarative. Yes, declarative. In fact, there's a lewd word that you could probably use to remember that. Or at least it sounds like one. Semantic. Declarative. One of the types of declarative memory is semantic. Get it? One of the types of declarative memory is semantic. I'll stop. But it can also help improve your accountability. Because if you're in a study group, there are other people who are expecting you to be there. That can improve your discipline rather than just your motivation. If you're studying by yourself, you might be relying on motivation. How motivated do I feel to study today? Whereas if you're studying in a group and you're supposed to be bringing notes on a particular part of that lesson, you can't just skip it. Other people are depending on you. You need to have discipline and be accountable. So some of the ways to get the most out of your study group session is to make them smaller. Bigger groups can make it easy to get lost in. It can make it very easy for you to shrink and to not participate as much. Keep those study groups to 4 or 5 people. And keep your sessions short. You don't need a 2-hour study group session. 45, 50 minutes, maybe an hour. But do them more often. Meet up together for 45 minutes twice a week rather than one 3-hour session. But go deep into each of those sessions. Don't just go over the notes. Pick one part of that and dive deep into it. So, smaller, shorter, but do it more often and go deep. Yes, yes. Remember, it's not how long you study for. Length isn't everything. It's about the quality. It's about how good you do it, not about how long you can do it for. But now you know what we got to talk about, class. You know what one of the last things we have to talk about will be? I don't even need to preface it. You know what it's going to be. It's right there on the screen. It's ChatGPT. We're going to talk about AI. We're going to talk about maybe not destroying the robots, except when we go back to play Nier Automata. But we do have to talk about ChatGPT. You've probably heard a lot of the stories, a lot of the studies that are going around right now. You've probably heard that it's not good for you, but people keep using it. I feel like it's kind of like smoking. Even as we are learning, or even as people were learning that smoking is bad for you, that smoking actually kills you, that it hurts every part of your body, people kept doing it. People still do it today. And it can be like an addiction route. I'm actually pretty troubled about the future of it with socio-emotional aspects. That I feel will destroy people even more than their over-reliance on it for cognition. We're seeing the stories come out already now. People getting deep into psychological problems because of their interactions with these not sentient things they consider to be sentient. So there's an ongoing study by Kosmina et al. That has gotten some very strong results and is a pretty in-depth study with a lot of analysis. One of the things that people have done in studies, they've broken up participants into 3 essay groups. People who were tasked with writing that essay using their brain only, using just between their ears. Participants who were allowed to use a Google search to assist them with writing the essay. And people who were allowed to use an LLM, ChatGPT. I'd like you to take some guesses. I've asked you throughout the lesson at times to tell me what you think. So one last time, what do you think? What do you think the results of this study were? Give me some general observations you think they made about the difference between these 3 groups. I am not a anti-LLM zealot, or whatever, what's the word but I feel like the use cases that are actually good to use now, as they are pretty limited. Maybe they will be more useful in the future, but I think for the time being, people need to be very aware. Without ChatGPT performed better, Henry, you think? Probably a safe guess. LLM was probably ass, Rao says. Well, here's what the results were. The brain-only group showed the highest neural connectivity. They did a lot of brain study, a lot of brain readings during this study. And in particular, the areas that had the highest neural connectivity were areas of the brain related to creativity, creative thought, memory load, and semantic processing, their ability to process facts. The Google search was better than the LLM, users had a high internal curation because they had to think about what they needed to look for. It wasn't as engaging as the brain only. But if you go deep into the study, which we're not going to do here, you found that there were actually areas in which the Google search group performed really well, because they also had to try to filter out incorrect results or irrelevant aspects. The LLM group, though, had the lowest brain engagement and, per the authors, consistently underperformed at neural, linguistic, and behavioral levels. It was also noted that over the course of several months, the ChatGPT users got lazier and lazier with each subsequent essay, and they often resorted to copy and paste by the end of the study. It just got worse and worse. So this study, as it's scrolling around here on the screen, there was a lot of data. All of the references that we've used so far will be available. They will be in the video description after it's uploaded. And you can go read all the studies that have been referenced so far. Try to always put my citations. This one in particular is absolutely fascinating. I would suggest checking it out if you're interested in the data at all. But it is very long, and there is a lot of analysis to go through. This isn't a classroom where we just read a study and talk about it. You can definitely find that out there. But this is a skills-based health class. We're here to focus on what can we actually do to improve our health and wellness, or to learn a new topic. If you are interested in this topic, though, this is a really interesting study to check out. We also cannot forget the problem that, quote, the more time users spend talking to ChatGPT, the lonelier they feel. And the social emotional aspect of learning and memory, also pretty important. But why is this so bad? Why is it so bad to use and rely on ChatGPT? Well, number one, it is incredibly easy to become over-reliant. The studies show that it can diminish your motivation. And we talked about how discipline is more important than motivation. But motivation can still be useful. If you're maintaining good discipline, you're doing the things you need to do even when you don't want them. Even when you don't want to do them. When you are motivated, you'll do even more. You'll get more done. But relying on AI tools will destroy your motivation because you're not actually doing any of the work. Again, I am not an anti-LLM zealot or prophet. There is potential use cases, but we need to be very careful how we're integrating it into our daily lives. It can also impair your critical thinking because you're relying on an outside source to judge and analyze and evaluate the facts. The third part, obviously, you can't always verify or trust the accuracy. But it's time for a little learning check. We have reached the part of the lesson where I'm going to assess your learning. The first thing we're going to ask in terms of our assessment here, we're going to talk about mnemonics. Can you remember what "wash a delicious juicy mango" stood for or meant? It was early in the lesson, so we're testing your memory and learning. It's okay if you don't remember. You haven't slept on it yet. But just first, what was it about? The presidents. Yes, it was about the presidents. Wow, yes. Washington, Adams, Jefferson, and Madison. Yes, Washington, Adams, Jefferson, Madison, MA. How about mirrors are just vanity? How could you remember what mirror referred to? And Rob, why did you spell that like a French person? So wash a delicious juicy mango and mirrors are just vanity tells you the first 8 presidents. Washington, Adams, Jefferson, Madison, Monroe, because mirror has an O and an R. The second Adams, the son. Jackson, and Van Buren. How about acronyms? What do you remember about PLAP? When we were trying to remember the different triggers that we can use to disassociate ourselves with our bad habits. What did PLAP stand for? It's okay to be wrong. It's okay to not remember. But what did we say PLAP stood for to help us remember? Remember that we used the example of drinking. You got a good number of them there, Rao. And ICO, people, location, actions. People, locations, access, and plans. So the people you might be around that you drink with, the locations that you drink in, your ease of access. You know, do you keep alcohol around the house? And the plans. Do you make plans that involve or revolve around alcohol a lot? But I bet you'll remember now, because there's a convenient acronym, and it has my signature little bit of humor to give you an emotional attachment. How about the amount of physical activity that you need to get per week? How much did the World Health Organization say that you needed to get? How about 1,000,000% more than you get now, Rao? Well, if you're getting none, then even 1% would be 1,000,000% more. I don't know. I'm not a math guy. I don't know how that works. So if I were to put on my tank top, my workout gear, and get my gym shorts on and do some physical activity, how much should I get? Put on my PE teacher whistle. Henry Bear, you've got it. 150 minutes of moderate intensity and 75 minutes of high intensity. Or vigorous intensity, whatever word you want to use. There we go. The last question, your last question. How many and number of hour sessions did I say was better than how many and number of hour sessions? You remember the watermelon pizza pie image? Yeah, there you go. It was 3 one-hour sessions would be better than 1 5-hour session. Because of consolidation. But now we put it to you, class. Do you have any remaining questions? Do you have anything that you want to discuss with the lesson? Any lingering thoughts in your mind? Anything that was unclear that you wanted clarification of? Otherwise, we do have all of the references that we used here. Again, they will be available in the video description once it's uploaded. And you can check out all of those studies, especially that very interesting one on LLMs. When do we designate LLM reliance as an actual substance abuse problem? I don't actually think that could be that far away. I think it is as dangerous as gambling or worse. And frankly, we're not taking gambling seriously enough either, especially among young people. I think I actually want to give a lesson regarding gambling and the rise of sports betting and app-based sports betting. I think that's a big issue that we should talk about. But for now, congratulations, class. You completed my memory and learning lesson this August 30th, 2025. If you would like to have me put your name on this certificate and send it to you as a high-quality glossy JPEG, you can jump into our Discord channel in the links in the chat right now, and you can also follow us on the socials. Remember that this lesson, if you didn't get to catch the full thing, will be uploaded to our YouTube channel in our YouTube playlist where all of our lessons are stored. You can check those all out. A lot of the lessons we referenced in this one are available there. But yeah, congratulations on this amazing lesson that you all participated in.